What's up guys, Asian here again with another PTS testing video, and today we're going to be taking a look at one of the new sets that comes with one of the dungeons. This is a medium armor set that, to me, when I first looked at it, looked pretty interesting, and it is actually, I think, at the very least, a viable alternative to running Infallible Aether on a healer for minor vulnerability uptime. So the set that I am talking about is known as Scavenging Demise. So it can get this from one of the new dungeons. Let me just double check which one it is, if I can find the box. Here it is. So you can get this from Depths of Malatar, and here is the 5-piece effect. So you get weapon damage, weapon crit as a 2, 3, 4 piece, and the 5-piece. When you deal critical poison damage to an enemy, you summon a Scavenging Maw who, after 2 seconds, attacks the enemy, dealing X amount of poison damage and inflicting minor vulnerability for 15 seconds. This effect can occur every 10 seconds. So you guys can already see why this set seems pretty nice to have on a stamina DPS. You get minor vulnerability for 15 seconds on a cooldown that is 10 seconds long. That's pretty nice. So that gives you an additional 5 seconds of leeway in order to reapply this minor vulnerability debuff. And the condition is actually pretty easy. Critical poison damage. As a stamina DPS, you should be running poison injection. That is poison damage. You should always have that dot running. So as long as it crits on the dot and on your front bar, you should be able to get the proc fairly easily. The bonus is that it also deals damage as well. Obviously, it doesn't do a lot of damage, so it's, in this case, I actually have it completely golded out here. So it's 95-90 poison damage every 10 seconds, so that ends up being at most 959 DPS from the damage itself. But we're not really running this for the damage, we're running this for that minor vulnerability uptime. So my initial thinking was run this on a stamina DPS, and then instead of running IA on a healer, you can have that healer run another set. That basically opens up a set for healers to do. And considering that stamina DPS is kind of the meta now for kind of those endgame score running guilds, it actually opens up Hircine's Veneer for healers to run. That's a medium armor set from Selene's Web that reduces the cost of your stamina abilities. So that just helps out your stamina DPS sustain a little bit. Then with the racial changes coming in, with Dark Elves being arguably the strongest race but lacking some sustain, having Hircine's Veneer might help out stamina DPS who are Dark Elves to sustain a little bit better, get higher DPS that way. So that was my thinking when I went ahead and started trying out Scavenging Demise. Now, of course, one of the things is that you kind of have to take into consideration your personal DPS loss from running Scavenging Demise, because you are no longer running Advancing Yokata. Advancing Yokata is by far one of the strongest, if not, well, one of the strongest, if not the strongest, front bar sets for stamina DPS. So how does this compare to Advancing Yokata? And if it does pretty decently well, is it worth running on a stamina DPS and taking off Infallible Aether on the healer and replacing it with a different set? So what I did was I basically tested this out. I only swapped out the front bar sets. So Scavenging Demise and Advanced Yokata were the 2 sets that I compared them against, and I ran them on the front bar as you typically would. The other pieces were Veladress and Reliquin, all medium, so I had 7 medium armor. I was running I was running Lava Foot Sultrus, which is basically taking a look at, it just basically simulates getting orbs on cooldown. So for solo parses, Lava Foot is regarded to be pretty decent replacement, kind of replication of actual in-raid sustain. Let me just double check to make sure this is the right parse. No, this is not the right parse. So let me just load up these parses here, just so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. So this 55.3k parse is with Scavenging Demise, and this 51.6k parse is without Scavenging Demise. This is with Advancing Yokata. So why is this one higher? Well, that's because of the minor vulnerability uptime. So we have 93% minor vulnerability. That increases damage received by 8%, which is why we have a higher parse here. This parse does not have minor vulnerability, so one of the things we have to do is we have to kind of correct, so to speak, for that minor vulnerability uptime. So that's what I did on the spreadsheet, which I'll show you guys in just a few moments here. So I do want to show you guys, first was the uptime on minor vulnerability. So 93% uptime minor vulnerability, really decent uptime. It's pretty much close you can get to 100%, so The highest I managed to get was about 95% minor vulnerability uptime, and that was because I started on my back bar, so obviously I could not get any procs during that first few seconds of the parse. So that's why it's pretty much I can't get 100% uptime, but you could potentially get 100% uptime with some fancy footwork, some fancy bar swapping work. So here is the actual proc damage itself. 854, a little bit lower than the theoretical max of, I think it was said 959, which makes sense. You're not going to be able to proc it necessarily on cooldown. It does proc on crit poison damage, but as long as you have that poison injection dot running, you should be able to proc it fairly easily and pretty close to on cooldown. Again, you do have that 5-second window in order to get the proc again. The minor vulnerability lasts 15 and it's on a 10-second cooldown, so you will be able to get 100% or as very close to 100% minor vulnerability uptime with that there. So now let's go ahead and swap gears so you guys can take a look at the parse numbers. So here are the results that I got. On the left hand side is the raw Advanced Yokeda parse numbers. On this column here we have the Advanced Yokeda parses if they had the average minor vulnerability uptime that I got. So here are the Scavenging Demise parses, and here are the minor vulnerability uptime for each of those parses. I just took the average of those parses and basically multiplied it out by this Advanced Yokeda. So it's basically, for example, here it'd be 51,651 times 1 plus 0.08 times the minor vulnerability uptime. So it's not exactly a 1.08 multiplication, it's a little bit less than that, but this is probably as close as you can get for correcting for minor vulnerability. And then here's the percent difference. So you can see here, you're actually not losing that much DPS. You're losing about half a percentage point of DPS in return for providing minor vulnerability to the group. So obviously your personal loss in DPS in this instance would be 300 DPS or so. Pretty minor when you consider that everybody else is getting that minor vulnerability debuff. A pretty big jump in DPS because it does, it is added on multiplicatively to damage done modifiers like minor berserk. So minor vulnerability is a very strong debuff to have if you want to increase your DPS. So I would say, at least from these results, that Scavenging Demise, I would probably use this on a stamina DPS, get rid of Infallible Aether from a healer, and use Hircine's Veneer instead to help your stamina DPS sustain a little bit better. So, or you can even put like a damage set on your healer if you're one of those guilds that you have a half DPS, half healer as one of your healers setups. So overall, Scavenging Demise, I would recommend actually farming for this set when the DLC releases in a couple of weeks. It's just, the DPS loss that you get is fairly minor compared to Advanced Yokeda. Now, of course, Advanced Yokeda does scale better with Warhorn compared to Scavenging Demise just because of that additional crit chance. But again, being able to provide minor vulnerability uptime very consistently it's worth the trade-off in your personal DPS loss. From these results, again, these are self-buffed parses, so they're not going to tell you the whole picture, but these are on a Nightblade, so we do have the major fracture, we already have the minor berserk. What we're missing here is obviously the additional sustain and then the Warhorn buffs. But just basing off of these results, I would say Scavenging Demise is a worthwhile investment as a stamina DPS. So what do you guys think about this? I personally think, like I mentioned, that it is a worthwhile set to farm, and I would probably completely swap Infallible Aether for this set if I had the opportunity to do so. So I kind of want to know what you guys think about this, especially for you guys who are rating at the high end, the kind of, going for scores and leaderboards and achievements. Kind of want to know what you guys think. Hope you guys found this video informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.